Hey, Catalyst community. There is obviously a lot of controversy around the flu vaccine. So we wanted to go to the source, get away from the most charismatic speaker on it or this pseudoscience website here or there that we might be looking at, and really dig into what does the evidence say? What does the science tell us? What can we know from the data that has been collected in the way data is supposed to be collected versus just cherry picking things? So super fortunate we were able to get Dr. William Schaffner, Vanderbilt University, professor of infectious disease, and he really helps us cut through all the baloney. Really, he addresses all the questions. We talk about autism, we talk about Guillain-Barré, we talk about autoimmune, we talk about how it changes year to year. What does that mean? What does that look like? Does it affect immunity? So I think you're really going to enjoy this. He doesn't avoid any of the questions, and it's a fascinating discussion. So as always, this is the unedited video version of an episode that will hit the Catalyst Health, Wellness, and Performance Coaching podcast in a couple weeks. But we wanted to get this out early to our subscribers here on the YouTube channel, and I hope you enjoy it. So let's dig into the evidence and let's go be a catalyst. All right. Well, Dr. Schaffner, thank you for joining us on short notice. This is flu season. Important time to get this message out ASAP. You are one of the experts nationwide. You come highly recommended. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Good to be with you, Bradford. Flu, it's that time of the year again. We should all get vaccinated.
Absolutely. And we'll talk about that and all the things that people are saying, like, no, here's why I shouldn't do it. And this is, but we'll dive into that. Before we do, let's get a baseline. Can you talk to us a little bit about the history of the flu shot, vaccination, kind of where it developed from, the effect it had early on, and what's happened since that time?
Yeah, well, it's had a long history. Obviously, influenza has been around forever, and we know it comes around in our temperate zones here in a very seasonal way. It starts acting up November, December, and then usually flu is fickle, but it peaks in January and February and then lingers a little bit until March and then kind of disappears during the summer. Some flu seasons start earlier, some a little bit later, and probably everybody by now knows that there are many flu viruses out there and they can mutate. So they can kind of change their coats, as it were. And that's why we have to update the flu vaccine each season. And now we have flu vaccines that protect against either 3 or 4 different influenza virus strains, because although you can have a dominant strain, there are others that kind of smolder around and can make you sick. So we're trying to protect using a shotgun approach rather than a rifle. And experts from around the world get together every 6 months and look ahead and try to decide what's the best composition of this flu vaccine for the northern hemisphere, during our winter.
Sure.
But in the southern hemisphere, during our summer, they have their winter. It's weird, right? But they have their winter and they have their flu season during the summer. So the flu vaccine composition internationally can change twice a year. And so the experts keep up with that constantly. They're constantly getting data from all around the world, goes together to the World Health Organization to figure out which flu strains are out there making people sick all the time.
So that's interesting. I was going to ask later about the various strains and how it seems like sometimes they say we kind of missed it this year. How long has it been going on where we're catching 3 or 4 at a time with a single vaccine?
Well, it's changed over the years. Shortly after World War II, we started to create flu vaccine, started with the armed forces, of course, to protect them for readiness, right? And then it went into the civilian population. We've had lots of changes in how we put that flu vaccine together. We've refined it. It has fewer and fewer and fewer side effects over time, and we've added broader coverage. We're still looking in the research laboratories for the universal flu vaccine, where you could get one vaccine that would protect against the vast majority of strains, and you would only have to get vaccinated, I don't know, once every 5 or 10 years.
Oh, really?
Science is not there yet, but you believe that a lot of people are after that holy grail, the universal flu vaccine.
And in your perspective, just won't hold you to this, but any guesses? Are we 5 years out from that, 20 years out from that? What do you think?
Well, I'll quote Dr. Francis Collins, who's a wonderfully smart, wonderfully astute man who's head of the National Institutes of Health. And about 10 years ago, he predicted we were 5 years away.
Okay. Fair enough.
I think
Fair
I'll
enough.
stay away from that.
Very good. All right, so let's just hit some of the questions that pop out because we've got a lot of folks listening that are saying, I don't know, Brad. I haven't done my flu shot. I got sicker when I took it. In fact, let's just start with that one. People that say, no, I get sicker when I take the flu shot. The years that I've done the flu vaccine, I just end up being sicker. What would be your response to them? Just coincidence, or is there anything to that?
Well, if people are concerned about feeling ill shortly after they get the flu shot in the day or two afterwards, of course, there will be some local side effects. Every time I get my flu vaccine, my arm hurts for about 3 hours. Other people, it lasts for a day and can even get into the second day. And there's a small percentage, we study this all the time, about 1%, only 1% of people have some sort of feeling puny. The next day may have some headaches, aches and pains.
Okay.
That's your body's immune system working on the vaccine. That's not flu. You cannot get flu from the flu vaccine.
Okay.
That's an old story and it's completely incorrect.
Okay.
And other than that, the adverse events associated with influenza vaccine are really very, very, very unusual. I mean, in the United States alone, we give about 170 million doses of influenza vaccine each year, and many, many more than that around the world. Now, Brad, let's be straight here, because the next thing you're going to hear from people is, that flu vaccine, it doesn't work very well.
Fair enough.
And,
Yeah, absolutely.
you know, it's not a perfect vaccine. Absolutely not. We would agree with that. And its effectiveness varies, and we can go into details if you like, from year to year, depending upon which flu strains are out there and how close the match is between what the experts thought could be put into the flu vaccine and the circulating viruses. Now, it's not a perfect vaccine, but I like to paraphrase that old French philosopher Voltaire. He admonished us, waiting for perfection is the great enemy of the current good.
Yeah.
This is the best vaccine medical science can produce for us today. It prevents thousands of infections and thousands of hospitalizations each year. But if it doesn't prevent your infection, you got the vaccine and darn, 2 months later, you actually came down with the flu. I can tell you, your flu illness was milder. You got partial protection.
Okay. And
Data
we
are,
know that. I mean, the evidence is showing us clearly it's not just the doc wants you to feel better about it.
no,
So
no, no,
it's
no, no.
absolute.
The data show that if you've had the vaccine and you've subsequently had the flu, your risk is much lower to being hospitalized, being in the intensive care unit, and dying. What's wrong with that?
That's pretty valuable.
It's not perfect, but it shifts the odds in our favor.
And not subtly. It's not a 55-45 thing. You're saying, we're talking 95, 97, 99% effectiveness in this case.
Well, I wouldn't use any of those numbers in association with influenza vaccine.
Okay.
Complete protection against any illness varies depending upon whether you're young and robust or older and frail. And depending on the year, it can go anywhere from as low as 20 to 30% sometimes. But in some populations, it's as good as 70%. But in addition to this complete protection, which is a perfectly valid way of looking at it, it also provides, in addition, a moderating effect on the illness that
Right.
might occur even though you had the vaccine.
Right. Okay. Good. Good. All right. So let's talk overall immunity. Have some people, I did a lot of research looking into some of the claims and concerns, that kind of stuff. A lot of people say, well, it reduces your overall immunity because your body isn't learning to adapt to that flu strain naturally. What would your comments to that be?
Well, I think the natural point of view is a very interesting one. It's as though we shouldn't modify anything we would do. Your body will take care of your appendicitis. I don't need a surgeon. Thank you very much. Well, I'm not so sure about that. It certainly doesn't work that way with infectious diseases. Infectious diseases have really mortal impact on people, and they can make people very, very sick. The whole point of vaccines is to reduce the impact that those infectious diseases on their own will have on us, right? I mean, we can use measles vaccine and basically eliminate measles.
Right.
That's how good that vaccine is. Why should anybody have to suffer a disease that they don't have to? And influenza vaccine will, as I say, help protect you against the most severe aspects of influenza. It's not as good a vaccine as the measles vaccine, sure, the tetanus vaccine. We understand that.
Sure, absolutely.
As I say, it shifts the odds in our favor.
And the immunity piece, there's nothing to that. The fact that I've done a flu shot every year for the last 20 years plus, and that's not a reduction of immunity. It's a completely different, it's almost two different conversations. Immunity's over here and vaccine is over here.
Well, my immune system, of course, is the system with which my body fights off infectious diseases.
Right.
And in point of fact, as we get older, we know our physical bodies become more frail. I'm not the robust fellow I was at age 22 anymore. And my immune system also becomes less robust. And that's why we actually have a couple of influenza vaccines, especially for people age 65 and older.
Okay.
They work a little more vigorously on the immune system, kind of kickstart the immune system, and they provide additional protection for people age 65 and older. Those vaccines, the high dose vaccine and the one with an adjuvant in it, actually work better in the older population than does the standard vaccine. So we're trying in baby steps to improve these flu vaccines year by year.
But it's not having any kind of negative effect on those folks in the other aspect, flu aside. If I'm 72 years old and I take this little bit stronger dose, my immunity for other things is not impacted in any way. I'm simply protected from this one strain or handful of strains.
You've got it down exactly. Correct.
Okay. Good. All right. Well, how about people that come in with high risk, things like diabetes, MS, other types of things? Is there anything about the flu shot, anything in the data that shows that might exacerbate some of those or other pre-existing conditions?
No, quite to the contrary. Those people who have underlying chronic illnesses are especially vulnerable to the more severe aspects of influenza. They're more likely to get pneumonia, which is the big complicating aspect of flu. So we urge them in particular to take advantage of flu vaccine. In fact, we've been talking to doctors as well as the patients. In your chronic disease management, think of flu vaccine as part of that chronic disease management. You're even more important to get vaccinated than the average citizen. We want everybody vaccinated, but we put special attention on you folks who have chronic underlying illnesses.
Okay, that's a great clarification. All right, so what about ingredients? Don't get too deep into the weeds for us here, but in terms of what people are putting to their body, I read a lot of people saying, "Well, you don't know what they're putting into you. I don't want that stuff going in my body." What is this thing that they're putting into our bodies?
Well, flu vaccine has pieces of the flu virus, not the whole virus, just pieces of it, right? Along with a number of other ingredients that just stabilize the situation so that the vaccine will actually work and won't deteriorate in the vial, right? And people are exposed to all of those little things, those extra little ingredients. None of them are toxic. If we thought they were, of course, we wouldn't use them. You know, the World Health Organization wouldn't recommend.
Be big on that.
It's the World Health Organization. they wouldn't be recommending the use of this vaccine. And they have to go through very stringent safety assessments all the time.
So claims around carcinogens. I saw some claims of, oh, there's carcinogens in that vaccine. Complete bunk, some wives' tale.
That's simply incorrect.
Okay. All right. Very good. All right. Let's touch on some names that people are going to throw out. Dell Bigtree, Andrew Wakefield. They have large following. A lot of folks that would consider themselves to be anti-vaxxers, think, oh, Dell's amazing. Oh, I love and former physician Andrew Wakefield. What advice would you give? Maybe you're not familiar with those two specifically, but what advice would you give for people that maybe are fans or in that camp and are listening to this and saying, I don't know, I don't believe this because Andrew says this or Dell says that. Any thoughts along those lines?
Well, I don't know these gentlemen personally, but I've been in the same room with both former Dr. Wakefield and Mr. Bigtree. They are vigorous personalities. They are charismatic. They are very articulate, and they are very passionate in their skepticism about vaccines. And I happen to just think that they're misguided, but they have a lot of people because they are, as I say, very
big. Yeah.
They're excellent communicators, both of them, and they have a genuine appeal. And when I've seen them both, been in the same room with them, they're not alone. They have a group of acolytes who are with them, and they're powerful, vigorous personalities. I just believe both those gents are on the wrong track. I wish we could recruit them to the pro-vaccine field because, as I say, they're very good communicators. And I haven't seen any of their allegations, their concerns actually manifested in solid scientific evidence. So they raise a lot of concerns, but they don't have any good data behind them. There's junk science, don't get me wrong, and they can cherry pick information such that they can put a very clever argument together, but I'm afraid they're incorrect.
So advice for the person, again, who's listening to this and maybe they're big fans of Dell and they're going, no, what would be some ways that they could fact check or what would be some ways that if they're seriously watching this and saying, I am genuinely curious, I'm not just coming in with my mind made up, I really want to know what this is all about. Are there some resources that they can go to fact check some of the things that these two gentlemen are saying, even though they're saying it very well, to find out, is it really, we're big on evidence-based practices here on this channel. So what can these folks do to pursue the evidence and not just believe in the charisma that's behind this?
Well, Bradford, there are a number of locations where they can go. They may be wary of the CDC's data, but the CDC's data are very solid.
Sure.
They go to an organization with which I'm affiliated, the National Foundation for Infectious Diseases. They have a website that's absolutely objective and provides good information. The American Academy of Pediatrics provides excellent information. You know, there are 80,000 pediatricians in the United States alone. They see patients and their parents from the moment the child is born, this infant child, until the children are passed on to we internists.
Right.
And they are dedicated to growth and development in the most healthy way for those children. To think that 80,000 pediatricians either all slept through that important lecture in medical school, or they're all doofuses, or they've all been duped, or they've all been paid off by vaccine manufacturers. Please.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, another website that's very popular. Again, not sure if you've heard it specifically, but greenmedinfo.com. They make a lot of claims, things like lack of efficacy. We've talked about that. It's not perfect. We're improving each time. Linked to autism, chronic and autoimmune diseases, those kinds of things. The person that loves that website, the person that quotes that website or refers people to that website, any suggestions for them to compare and contrast what that's saying? You mentioned junk science. Is that generally seen as junk science? Is that generally seen as cherry picking science? What are your thoughts on that?
Those are valid concerns. They have been raised. The autism issue in particular is well known. Uh, and also the issue concerning autoimmune illnesses. That comes up all the time
Yeah.
whenever vaccines are introduced, and they are a concern of all the expert advisory committees because there is some biological plausibility to the autoimmunity concern, not the autism concern. That's been put to rest many times.
Yeah, let's just say that one more time before we move to autoimmune. The
Well,
autism studies very
autism,
clearly.
there must be 24 autism studies now that have put that to rest. And I'm afraid that the original study was discovered to be not only faulty, but fraudulent. I mean, that's why the doctor lost his license to practice medicine in the United Kingdom.
Gotcha.
So
autism is off the table. That's not even a conversation. For anyone who seriously does their research, that's not even a conversation anymore.
Right.
Okay, very good. So let's talk about autoimmune.
Autoimmunity is a matter of concern with every vaccine because is it possible this immune stimulation, whether by the disease itself or by the vaccine, could stimulate an autoimmune response, even if it could do that rarely, is a matter of great concern. For example, Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is a paralytic illness involving the nervous system, is thought to have a major autoimmune cause. And we know it occurs in the general population of a rate of about 1 per every million people in the population. So there's a background rate of this illness, including instigated by influenza, the virus itself. So the question is, could influenza vaccine stimulate the occurrence of Guillain-Barré syndrome? Now, for starters, if you're trying to assess an illness that occurs about 1 in a million, there are really methodological challenges here. Yeah. It is tough, but it has been thought that from year to year, it varies, the studies vary. There is a possibility that influenza vaccine might predispose someone to Guillain-Barré syndrome at about the same rate, 1 per million. But the studies, as you can imagine, from year to year, either support that or say no. Is there year-to-year variation, or is this such a difficult thing to assess that you might expect from year to year using even similar approaches couldn't hit the target? But whatever it is, we're cognizant of it. We make the point, and anybody who has previously had Guillain-Barré syndrome within 6 weeks of receiving flu vaccine is recommended not to receive it. Okay. And so we try to take that into account.
And so you're looking at it and saying it's 1 in a million to start with. So even if it increases it by 100%, which we know it doesn't, we're talking 2 in a million. Have we seen any kind of trend? Is there any trend as this flu vaccine has come into play with any significant increase in Guillain-Barré or some of these other things?
No, not as far as we can measure. So you would think as we're giving more flu vaccine each year, and we are, fortunately, you would see a consequent increase in Barré syndrome. Yeah. And that hasn't happened. But I keep saying, trying to measure something at 1 per million and see if it goes up to 2 or 3, that's very, very hard. Although people do look for that very carefully. And remember, the impact of flu on people with its hospitalizations and deaths is so much multitudes larger than any kind of potential tiny increase in Guillain-Barré syndrome that everybody I know anyway thinks that obviously the benefits of flu vaccine vastly outweigh any potential possible increase in Guillain-Barré. Crossing the street has a risk. Getting into your car has a risk. We're all adults here. There's nothing risk-free. Aspirin has a risk. We just have to understand that, integrate that into our lives, and do the best we can. John Stuart Mill, that old Scottish philosopher, said, the greatest good for the greatest number.
That's a great reminder. You look at the plus side, you're influencing thousands of lives a year. The downside, you might be tweaking a 1 in 1 million. That's a pretty powerful data point. Very nice. Very nice. All right. So
I would wish for perfection.
Sure. And we all would, but
remember Voltaire.
This is still Earth.
Waiting for perfection is the great enemy of the current good.
Right. Yeah. Keep bringing us back to that. All right. So somebody asked, why should they get the flu shot for the sake of others? They, for example, the person that asked this, they have an older family member who has already had the flu shot. And their question is, well, why should I get it for their sake if they've already had it? Why? I'm not putting them more at risk, am I?
Well, I'm not sure I understand the question completely, but we get the flu vaccine really for two reasons. These are all communicable diseases we're talking about. They can spread, and you can spread the virus. So we give it, first of all, to protect ourselves. That makes sense, right? We're going to get some benefit from this. But it also makes it less likely that we'll be a dreaded spreader, that we won't give this virus. I mean, we don't want to, but inadvertently to people whom we love, the folks at work, the people with whom we're at the gym or whomever. And we don't want to do that. Aunt Susie, to whom we give the virus with her diabetes, she may get really sick, and then we would be aghast at that. So we always use these vaccines against these contagious infections for both personal and what we call community protection. We would like the impact on the communities in which we live, particularly those close to us, to be as low as possible.
So even if you're not, this person was asking specifically for, I believe, their father's already had the flu shot. Why would they get it? To protect that person? Well, maybe they're not for that specific reason, but as a community, you're protecting other people in the process.
But let's be realistic. So dad gets the flu vaccine, right? Why should I get the flu vaccine? Because I'm young and strong, the flu's not going to hit me. Well, for two reasons. One, sometimes flu takes young, strong people less frequently, but puts them right in the emergency room and makes them deathly ill. All of us who work in hospitals see that every year. So you're protecting yourself. But the other thing is, your dad is getting the flu vaccine. We just said the flu vaccine is not perfect. So let's build some layers of protection around dad. Dad gets one layer of protection by getting vaccinated. He gets another layer if I'm vaccinated. So I'm much less likely to bring flu into the house.
Because it's reducing.
Right?
Right. Because it's reducing the frequency or the dynamic of what you would then contract if you've had it, even if you get it.
Right, exactly. Layers of protection add up, and that makes dad safer. He's safer with his own vaccine. He adds safety because I'm vaccinated and I can't bring the virus to him.
Okay, good. All right, just a couple more. Looking ahead, COVID obviously is the 24/7 news. Any sense of whether a similar issue will exist with various strains of COVID like we have with the flu, or do we have no idea at this point? Is it possible to extrapolate with that?
Knock wood. The essential part of the COVID virus, the critical part that the vaccines are designed to latch onto, think of the COVID virus as a sphere, and then it has things that stick up out of it, the so-called spike proteins. They're key because they lock into the cell and allow the virus to get in. So the antibodies that are created, the protection, gloms onto the spike protein, and then the virus can't get into the cell and can't multiply in our bodies. The point is, the spike protein has remained very stable in the COVID virus. So far, so good. It looks like the vaccines which are being developed really are going to work against this virus. Now, mind you, the COVID virus can have other mutations that allows the virologist to track it and say that's this strain or that strain. But the spike protein has remained stable. And from the point of view of the vaccine development, that's key.
Okay. And does that stay stable only because we're in the first season of it? And that could easily change next year. And I know you don't know the 100% answer to this, but is that stable in the flu? But the next year it changes. And could that happen? Of course it could. Is that likely to happen with the COVID? From your understanding at this point?
Our understanding is this. I mean, COVID virus has been in millions of people. So the virus has had millions of opportunities to mutate.
Yeah.
And the spike protein hasn't.
Okay.
So far, so good. Let's not wish for bad things. Let's hang on to the good stuff we've got. And we're going to be following this over time. If it changes, we'll let you know.
Perfect.
But so far, so good.
Beautiful. All right. Just one more kind of wrap-up question. Final words of wisdom for listeners in regards to myths, misconceptions, preconceived notions, et cetera, about the flu shot. Just anything that I haven't dug into with the right question, or things you'd like to share based on other conversations and presentations you've done.
Well, Bradford, I'd always like to get in a note about pregnant women.
Oh, good.
Women who are pregnant during flu season should be vaccinated against influenza. The American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists is strongly in favor. It's safe. Now, it has two very special benefits for the pregnant woman. One, it protects her. And it turns out that women who are pregnant who get real flu are more likely to have complications than their non-pregnant counterparts. So we want to protect those women. But more important to the minds of many, some of the protection that the woman makes passes through the placenta, goes into that newborn, and during the first 6 months of the newborn baby's life, too early to vaccinate the baby, her protection will provide some protection to that baby. We got easily a half dozen studies that show that. So if you vaccinate the mom, you protect too, the mom as well as the newborn.
Wow, I had not heard that.
And when the women hear that, they roll up their sleeves.
Totally. Absolutely. That's fantastic. This has been so helpful. Anything else that I haven't touched on that you'd like to bring out at this point? Because it's been very, very valuable.
Bill gets it down to very simple things. Flu bad, vaccine good.
That's a good way to, that's an easy way to remember it. Dr. Schaffner, thank you so much. Really appreciate you joining us.
My great pleasure, of course. Everybody, stay healthy.